Hello, Christopher Brent here, coming to you with a music theory tutorial on intervals. Okay, so what are intervals? In music theory, intervals are the distance between two pitches. Just like in math, intervals are going to be the distance between 2 points on a line. So, in music, intervals are very important to understanding harmony and chord structure. So, if we have a note here on the staff, right here, this is B on the staff here. We got a treble clef, third line up, that note is going to be B. Now, if I draw a note right next to that, of course that's going to be C, okay? Now, if I simply count 1, 2, I'm going to identify this as a second, okay? So, this will be identified as a second, okay, by just counting the line and then the next space note up. I simply just count the number of lines and spaces on the staff, okay? Now, if I have a note here, the same note, which is going to be B, and I put another note up here, okay, this will be a third. I'm going 1, 2, 3, and counting the line, space, line. I'm basically going right up the staff and counting, starting on the principal note, which is in this case going to be B. I go 1, 2, 3, and therefore I will identify this as a third. Okay, and then next, if I put a note here, the same spot, I have B, right? I put a note up here, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4. This will be a fourth. Okay, so notice with intervals, okay, we have a second, a third, a fourth. We can obviously have a fifth, sixth, a seventh, and then an eighth, also called an octave. You'll see that. That's very important. We will measure this all the way up to a 13th in music. Typically, once we get past the ninth, the jazz harmony, especially, will deal with intervals that have to do with the extended harmony, the 11th, the 13th. That typically is jazz harmony when we get into intervals that are that far apart. So let's take a look here at the keyboard, and we'll talk about some of these intervals as well. So if I take the camera, we go right over here to the keyboard, okay, and let's say I play that same note, which is going to be B, okay, and I go from B up to C, right next to it, okay, that's going to be a second. I just simply go 1, 2, and identify that as a second. Okay, now if I go from B up to D, right here, okay, that will be identified as a third. I go 1, 2, 3, okay, and I get myself a third. Likewise, here, this will be a fourth. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and I get myself the fourth. Okay, and this can keep going all the way up in the same pattern. Okay, so if I take another note, let's say C. Okay, here's C, and I go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's a fifth. Okay, this would be a sixth. Here we have a seventh, which sounds very dissonant, and an eighth. This is going to be our octave. Of course, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's how we get our 8. It's very important to start your counting on the principal note. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that's our octave. This is a very important interval in music, okay? This is basically how intervals can be counted on the keyboard and looked at and observed. And of course up here, this is how they can be observed on the staff, okay? So you can count the lines and spaces on the staff, and you can count the lines and spaces, you can count the keys on the keyboard, okay? So this is basically how intervals work when they're stacked on top of each other. Okay, these are what we would call harmonic intervals, okay? And you can also have intervals that are split apart, something like this, okay, where they'll be split apart, and those what we will call melodic intervals. So these are harmonic when they're stacked on top of each other, and these are going to be more of the melodic intervals. So hopefully this gives you a basic understanding of what intervals are, and I'll get more in depth in them as I make more tutorials on chords and inversions of chords, so you might want to check those out. For more information, go to christopherbrent.com, and you can also check out my YouTube channel, some of the other performances that I've had, and download some of my music from the iTunes store. So keep on practicing, and we'll see you next time.